The notification came at exactly 1:12 a.m. Not a knock, not a doorbell, just a message on my phone that said, "Motion detected." When I opened the clip, there was no one outside, but I could hear someone breathing, right on the other side of my front door. And that was the moment I realized something was wrong, because the camera wasn't warning me about someone outside. It was recording because the door had already moved. I moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, because I wanted quiet, and because quiet felt like the closest thing to forgiveness I could still afford. After my divorce, after the months of sleeping on my brother's couch in Phoenix, after the noise of blame and lawyers and people who suddenly knew how to explain my life better than I did, Flagstaff felt high enough and far enough away that the past would have to climb to reach me. The house was small, cedar-sided, built in the late 70s on the south end of town near the Pines, close enough to Route 66 that you could hear the occasional semi at night, but far enough that it sounded like weather instead of traffic. I worked remotely as a systems analyst, which meant my days blurred into screens and coffee, and my nights were long and silent, the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. I installed a doorbell camera the first week I moved in, not because I was paranoid, but because everyone did it now. And because after losing so much control in a short period of time, the idea of being notified when something approached my door felt like a small, reasonable promise to myself. The first few weeks were uneventful. The app filled with harmless clips, the mail carrier dropping envelopes, a neighbor walking her husky, snow sliding off the roof in lazy sheets. I told myself the house felt safe. I told myself that a town full of college students and retirees and tourists chasing mountain air didn't have room for anything else. The first time I saw him, I didn't understand that it was the first time. It was just another thumbnail buried between deliveries and dogs, time-stamped 3:07 a.m. A gray smear of night vision that looked empty until I scrubbed back and noticed a vertical shape at the edge of the frame, too still to be a tree shadow, too deliberate to be a trick of compression. When I zoomed in, my finger hesitated on the glass like it didn't trust what it was about to show me. And then there he was, standing on my porch, square to the door, hands hanging at his sides as if he'd been placed there rather than having arrived. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't knock. He didn't pace or shift his weight the way cold people do at 3 in the morning in northern Arizona. He just stood there, his head tipped slightly upward, aligned with the lens. The clip lasted 12 seconds and ended without sound. I told myself it was a glitch. Doorbell cameras missed things. The internet missed things. I went back to sleep with the phone face down on the nightstand, telling myself that fear always needed a story to survive, and I wasn't going to give it one. The second night, the alert came again at 3:06 a.m. The chime sharp enough to cut through a dream where I was still arguing with my ex about the dog we no longer shared. I watched the clip sitting up in bed, the blue light painting the room with a sickly calm. And the man was there again, closer this time, his shoes just at the edge of the welcome mat I hadn't bothered to replace. The night vision washed everything into shades of bone and ash, but I could see the texture of his jacket, the way the seams ran along the shoulders like a road map I didn't know how to read. His face refused to cooperate with the camera. It wasn't blurred or hidden by a hood. It simply lacked the information my brain expected. The longer I stared, the more I realized the camera wasn't failing to focus. It was focusing everywhere except where a face should be. The clip ran for 19 minutes and 34 seconds. He never moved. I slept with the lights on after that, the house humming with electricity and the heater kicking on and off like a nervous tick. In the morning, I called the Flagstaff Police Department, embarrassed by how my voice sounded like it belonged to someone younger, someone who hadn't learned yet how to sound reasonable. The officer who came out was kind in the way people are when they've seen fear before and know it rarely looks dramatic. He walked the perimeter, checked the snow for footprints, asked about neighbors. No one else's cameras had caught anything. There were no tracks leading up to the porch, no scuffs on the steps. He asked if it could be someone I knew. I watched the clip again with him standing beside me, the two of us leaning into the phone like it was a campfire. No, I said, and meant it more deeply than I expected. If it was, I'd remember a face. He suggested adjusting the sensitivity settings, changing the angle, and left me with a card I placed face down on the counter, like a bad omen I didn't want to read. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch, with the lights off and the curtains open, watching the dark like it might flinch first. The alert came at 3:08 a.m. The clip opened on the porch empty. Then he stepped into frame from the left, so close that the lens caught the fog of his breath blooming and fading. A small, intimate cloud that made my stomach tighten. For the first time, there was sound. A slow, steady inhale and exhale, like someone who'd been walking uphill for a long time and had finally reached the place they meant to be. He leaned forward until the camera distorted the shape of his head, and then he raised his hand. Not to knock, not to ring the bell. He pointed at the lens, the gesture precise, deliberate, as if correcting a mistake. The clip ended abruptly, the app returning me to a grid of harmless moments that suddenly felt staged. I checked the system logs with a diligence born from my job and my need to believe that numbers still told the truth. That's when I noticed something that made my scalp prickle. The camera had not logged any motion at night. Every clip of the man, every single one, was recorded at 6:41 a.m., the exact time I left for work on the days I had to drive into Phoenix. The moment the door opened and daylight flooded the porch, the footage wasn't being triggered by him. It was being triggered by me. I told myself there was a technical explanation, that the app was mislabeling events, that the clock was drifting. I reset everything. I changed passwords. I angled the camera slightly downward. I placed a motion sensor inside the entryway, a cheap one from the hardware store, just to feel like I was doing something. The following night, the alert came at 3:07 a.m. again, and when I watched the clip, the porch was empty. The husk of fear in my chest loosened just enough for relief to slip in. I laughed at myself, a short, brittle sound. Then the camera panned, a slow, mechanical correction like a camera operator realizing they'd framed the shot wrong, and there he was, standing so close to the door that his outline bled into the wood grain, his presence flattening the depth of field until the porch looked like a photograph someone had pressed against the lens. He stood there for 22 minutes. The interior motion sensor never went off. In the morning, I found the welcome mat had been turned upside down. The words "home" were pressed into the snow in reverse, as if the mat had been flipped from inside the house. I didn't call the police again. I didn't tell my brother. I told myself that fear grew best when it had witnesses, and I wasn't going to feed it. Instead, I researched. Flagstaff had its share of stories, as any old town does. There were accounts of lights in the forest, of hikers who heard their names called in voices they recognized, of doors found open after nights when the snow was untouched. I read about the concept of thin places, about elevations and fault lines, and the idea that some locations were less stable than others, not in a geological sense, but in a narrative one. I learned the house had belonged to an older man who died alone, that his daughter had sold it quickly, that the listing photos had been taken in summer when the porch was a friendly rectangle of light. The following night, the alert came earlier, at 2:58 a.m. The man stood farther back, at the edge of the porch, as if reconsidering. He didn't look at the camera this time. He looked at the door handle. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, the phone in my hands like a confession I didn't want to make. I whispered, "Go away," without knowing who I was talking to. The handle didn't move. He didn't ring the bell. The clip ended. In the morning, there was a smear on the inside of the door, a faint arc at the height of a shoulder, as if someone had leaned against it from within. I began to dread 6:41 a.m. more than the nights. Leaving for work meant opening the door, and opening the door meant giving the camera permission to record what waited on the other side. On the fourth night, the alert came at 3:07 a.m., and the clip was only 3 seconds long. It showed the door from inside the house. The angle was wrong, low and tilted, as if the camera had been set on the floor. I could see my own reflection in the glass of the door, pale and sleepless, standing just out of frame. Then the clip cut. I checked the camera physically, my hands shaking enough that I had to sit down on the porch steps. It was still mounted where I'd installed it, screws tight, no signs of tampering. I didn't sleep after that. At 6:41 a.m., I stood in the entryway with my keys in my hand and the phone in the other. The app open, my breath loud in my ears. I told myself I wouldn't look. I told myself that whatever waited would only be made real by my attention. I opened the door anyway. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. And for a moment, there was nothing there but the quiet street and the pines holding their breath. Then I heard it behind me, a slow exhale. And in the reflection of the glass, I saw him, standing inside my house, his head tilted toward the camera that had been recording us both, his finger raised, pointing, not at the lens this time, but at me, as if to say I had finally arrived where I was meant to be. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running. What I remember is the certainty that settled into my chest in that moment, heavier than fear, heavier than shock. The understanding that the house hadn't been empty before I moved in, and it wouldn't be empty after I left. The next clear memory I have is sitting in my car at the end of the street with the engine running and my hands locked around the steering wheel, my phone buzzing nonstop in my lap. Missed calls from my brother. An automated email from the Doorbell app. A single new clip recorded at 6:41 a.m. I didn't watch it. I drove instead, straight out of Flagstaff. Down the mountain, as the sun crept up behind me, the pines thinning until the world felt flatter and easier to understand. I stayed with my brother for 3 weeks and told him a version of the truth that sounded reasonable enough to survive daylight. Anxiety, burnout, a break-in scare. He didn't press. People rarely do when the explanation allows them to stay comfortable. During those weeks, I tried to delete the app. Every time I did, it reinstalled itself after a restart, logged in automatically, like it had never accepted my decision to leave. I stopped sleeping with my phone in the room. I stopped sleeping much at all. Eventually, I hired a property manager to handle the sale. I refused to step foot back inside the house. The inspection report came back clean. No signs of forced entry. No damage. The buyers were a young couple from California, excited about snow and quiet and starting over. They waived contingencies. They asked if I could leave the camera installed. I said yes, without thinking, because saying no felt like an invitation. On the day the sale closed, I finally opened the app. There were no new clips. The activity log was empty in the way a room feels empty after furniture has been moved, clean but wrong. I deleted my account. The app stayed anyway. 6 months passed. I moved again, farther south, closer to noise and people and light. I told myself the distance mattered. I told myself altitude had been the problem. That thin air did strange things to perception. One night, long after I'd stopped checking the time out of habit, my phone chimed from the other room. The sound was unmistakable. The doorbell alert. I didn't pick it up. I knew better than to look right away. When I did, my hands steady in a way they hadn't been before. The thumbnail showed a porch I recognized but no longer owned. Snow piled against the railing. A welcome mat turned upside down. Timestamp: 3:07 a.m. The clip opened on the empty porch. Then, the door opened from the inside. The new owners stepped out, bundled and half awake, arguing softly about a noise they thought they'd heard. The camera recorded because the door moved. It always recorded when the door moved. For one frame, just one, before the clip ended, I saw him standing behind them in the reflection of the glass, his finger raised, pointing past the lens, pointing toward me, as if the distance between us had never mattered at all. As if doors were just suggestions, and bells were only for people who needed permission to be let in. I moved to Marfa, Texas, for the same reason people always claim they moved to small towns they found on a map late at night. I wanted quiet, and I wanted the kind of quiet that felt earned. The kind that comes after something in your life breaks and doesn't bother asking permission first. My wife, Erin, and I had just lost our second pregnancy, and the apartment in Austin had become a museum of things we couldn't use and conversations we didn't know how to finish. Marfa felt like a pause button. One long road, wide skies, the promise that nothing happened there unless you went looking for it. We rented a small adobe house on the edge of town, not far from the railroad tracks. The kind of place real estate listings describe as simple when they mean nothing here can hide. The landlord was an older man who lived in Alpine and spoke about the place like it was already a memory, apologizing for the creaky door and the spotty cell service, telling us the previous tenant had left in a hurry but paid the last month anyway. Erin liked the light, the way mornings stretched across the walls like they had time to think. I liked the idea that if something went wrong, I would hear it coming. That was the first lie I told myself. We didn't install a doorbell camera. That matters. I was the kind of person who liked to know where his devices came from and why they existed, and the house didn't come with one. The first week passed with the normal markers of newness. The sound of our footsteps echoing in rooms that hadn't learned us yet. The smell of dust warming in the afternoon. The way the desert went quiet at night in a way that made the quiet feel like a presence rather than an absence. Erin slept better than she had in months. I didn't. On the 8th night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand at 2:41 a.m. The sound was wrong for a text. Too clean. too deliberate. I stared at the ceiling for a second, counting my breaths before reaching for it. The notification was from an app I didn't remember installing, a generic name with a blue icon that meant nothing to me at first glance. Motion detected, it said. Below it, a thumbnail of our front porch, washed in night vision gray, empty except for the welcome mat Aaron had bought at a thrift store in town. I sat up, my heart already deciding this mattered before my brain caught up. I opened the app. The clip was 12 seconds long. It showed our porch from an angle that didn't make sense, too low, too far to the right. Like someone had placed the camera near the ground and tilted it upward. At second 7, a shadow passed through the edge of the frame, thin and vertical, like a person walking just out of view. There was no sound. The clip ended. I closed the app and checked my phone's permissions. The app wasn't listed. I searched my email for a confirmation. Nothing. Erin stirred beside me, murmured my name. I told her it was a glitch. I told her the internet out here was strange. I didn't tell her that the porch looked like ours but not quite, that the angle made the door seem taller, more distant, like it belonged to a different house that happened to share our address. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the house. There was no camera. I checked the eaves, the posts, the mailbox. Nothing. The landlord hadn't mentioned anything. When I asked him about it over the phone, he laughed softly and said the last tenant was into gadgets, that maybe he'd left something behind. He promised to ask around. Aaron joked about Marfa being haunted, about the lights people claimed to see out in the desert. I smiled when she did. It felt like progress, like humor had found a way back in. That night, the notification came again at 2:39 a.m. This time, the clip showed someone standing on the porch. A woman, maybe, based on the slope of the shoulders, the way the hair fell forward like a curtain. She stood with her back to the camera, facing the door, so close that the wood grain pressed into her outline. She didn't knock. She didn't ring a bell. She just stood there, breathing. I could hear it now, a slow, steady sound, like someone counting steps. The clip ran for 23 minutes. Erin woke up halfway through and watched it with me, her hand finding mine without either of us looking away. "That's not funny," she whispered, even though there was nothing funny about it. I called the non-emergency line in the morning. The deputy who came out was polite in the way small-town authority always is. A little apologetic, like he didn't want to ruin our day with his presence. He found no footprints. No neighbors had seen anything. When I showed him the video, he frowned at the angle and asked where the camera was. When I told him there wasn't one, he suggested maybe the app was pulling from a nearby device, a neighbor's system overlapping with ours. He suggested uninstalling it. I tried. The app wasn't on my phone. That afternoon, Erin found an old smartphone in a kitchen drawer we hadn't used yet. It was powered off, scuffed, the kind of phone you keep as a backup and forget about. When she charged it, the same app opened automatically, logged in, the porch filling the screen like a held breath. The account name was an email address neither of us recognized. The activity log went back months, showing clips of people coming and going. Some we recognized as the previous tenant from the listing photos, others we didn't recognize at all. One clip showed a woman standing in the doorway, arguing with someone inside. The timestamp was 2 weeks before we'd moved in. Erin paused the video, leaned closer. "That's me," she said, and the room went very still. The woman in the video had Erin's hair, Erin's posture, Erin's hands, one lifted in a familiar gesture of frustration. But the clothes were wrong, and the house behind her looked emptier, the walls bare. The date on the clip was 3 months before we'd even considered moving. We stopped laughing after that. The notifications became nightly. Sometimes the porch was empty. Sometimes there was a person there, always facing the door, always waiting. The angles changed, subtly, as if the camera were being adjusted by someone who understood framing better than we did. The app began to send clips during the day, too, recordings of us leaving for groceries. Erin pausing to lock the door. Me checking my pockets, moments we didn't remember consenting to be archived. The worst ones were the reflections. In the glass of the door, in the darkened window beside it, there were shapes that didn't match our movements. Delays that made it look like the house itself was remembering us incorrectly. Erin stopped sleeping. I started keeping the lights on at night, which only made the darkness outside feel more deliberate, like it was waiting its turn. We considered leaving. We talked about it in circles, the way you do when you know the answer but aren't ready to accept the cost. The landlord stopped returning my calls. One night, the notification came at 3:01 a.m., and the clip opened on the inside of the house. The angle was low, tilted up at the door from the entryway floor. I could see the hem of Erin's robe as she stood just out of frame. I could hear her breathing. Then, I heard another breath, closer to the microphone, not matching the rhythm of the first. The clip ended. Erin cried then, the kind of crying that doesn't ask for comfort because it doesn't believe comfort exists. I held her and watched the screen like it might blink first. The next day, we packed. We didn't tell anyone. We drove to Alpine and booked a motel room that smelled like bleach and relief. I tried to wipe the phone, to smash it, to leave it behind. Every time I powered it on, the app opened and played a new clip, the porch, waiting, patient. Erin asked me what I thought it wanted. I told her the truth, or the closest thing I had to it. I told her I thought it wasn't ours, because nothing about it belonged to us, that the camera was a window someone else had cut into the house, and the house had agreed to it. We listed the place remotely. The buyers were a retired couple from New Mexico, drawn by the art scene and the idea of desert quiet. They asked about security. I said the house didn't have a system. On the day the sale closed, the app sent one final notification. I opened it in the motel room while Erin showered, the steam fogging the mirror like a mercy. The clip showed the porch empty. Then the door opened from the inside, and the new owners stepped out, smiling, squinting into the sun. The camera recorded because the door moved. It always recorded when the door moved. For a single frame, I saw Erin and me standing in the reflection of the glass, older, thinner, watching ourselves leave, and behind us, just inside the house, the shape that never rang the bell leaned closer to the lens, adjusting the angle, as if making sure it would recognize us the next time we forgot where we lived. I moved to Astoria, Oregon, because I needed a place where the ocean could think for me when I couldn't. A town where the fog arrived like a decision already made, and the nights carried the steady breathing of water against stone. After my father died, the house I grew up in became too loud with memory. Every creak a sentence I didn't want to finish. Every photo a question I couldn't answer without my voice breaking. Astoria was practical and lonely in the right proportions. I rented a narrow, weathered house on the hillside above the river, old enough to remember ship horns as a language rather than a novelty, close enough to the bridge that its red lights stitched the dark together every night. I worked late, editing audio for a public radio affiliate in Portland, which meant my days were quiet and my nights were tuned to other people's voices, the careful reminders of how to sound calm when the world refused to cooperate. I installed a doorbell camera because the stairs to my front door were steep and slick with moss, and because being notified felt like control, even if it was just a notification, a sound pretending to be certainty. The first week, the app was a comfort. Clips of the mail carrier's boots, the neighbor's cat, fog drifting like a slow animal across the porch. The ocean kept time for me. Then, the notifications began to arrive without meaning. They came late, usually after midnight, announcing motion where there was none. I would open the clip and see an empty porch, the night vision turning rain into static, the audio capturing only the soft hiss of the river below. I blamed the fog, the angle, the software. I adjusted settings the way you adjust expectations, hoping effort could replace understanding. The alerts kept coming. One night, the notification arrived at 1:12 a.m., and the thumbnail showed a shape too close to the lens to be rain. I opened the clip. A man stood inches from the camera, his features washed into pale confusion by the infrared, his eyes reflecting light in a way that made them seem too awake. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the bell. He just stood there, breathing slow enough that the audio barely caught it, as if he had learned how to occupy space without announcing himself. The clip lasted 14 seconds and ended without explanation. I watched it again and again until repetition dulled the edges of fear into something like curiosity. I told myself it was a transient, someone lost in the fog, someone who had realized his mistake and moved on. The next night, the alert came at 1:11 a.m. The man was back. He stood farther from the door this time, his posture different, like he was learning. The audio captured a faint sound that took me a moment to recognize as humming. A low, tuneless vibration that felt less like a song and more like a calibration. I called the non-emergency line in the morning and explained myself carefully, the way you do when you're aware of how you sound. The officer who came by was young and earnest, his boots leaving wet crescents on my steps. He found no footprints. He suggested the river played tricks on sensors. He suggested motion from the bridge lights. He suggested I get more sleep. That night, I left the porch light on. The notification arrived at 1:09 a.m. The porch was dark. The light was off. I checked the switch in the morning. It was still on. I didn't sleep after that. The notifications became precise. Always around the same minute. Always just long enough to make a point. Sometimes, the porch was empty, but the audio carried a breath that wasn't mine, a careful inhale as if someone were reading instructions aloud. Sometimes the man appeared at the edge of the frame, never centered, never granting the camera the satisfaction of his face. Once, the clip recorded for 26 minutes, and I watched the fog roll in and out like a tide obeying rules I didn't know. The man absent but implied, the way absence can feel crowded. I began to dread the sound of my phone more than silence. I began to dread silence, too. I told myself there was a pattern, that patterns were solvable. I exported the clips and listened to the audio through headphones at work, isolating frequencies, boosting the noise floor. Beneath the hiss and the river, there was a rhythm that didn't belong to weather. A count. Not numbers, exactly, but spacing. A regularity that suggested intention. On the 12th night, the notification came early. At 12:47 a.m., the clip opened on the inside of my house. The angle was wrong, low and tilted toward the front door from the entryway floor. I could see my own shoes by the mat, the scuff on the wall I hadn't painted over yet. The audio captured my refrigerator cycling on, the distant horn of a ship, and another sound closer to the microphone, a soft contact like fingertips brushing fabric. The clip ended. I checked the camera physically, my hands shaking enough that I had to sit on the steps. It was still mounted where I'd installed it, screws tight, cable intact. I didn't call the police again. I didn't tell anyone. Fear, I had learned, spreads best when shared. The next day, my phone buzzed at 1:12 p.m. The app sent a notification I had never seen before. Not motion detected, not sound detected, just a single line of text. You missed it. The clip attached showed my porch in daylight. The door opened. I stepped out, coffee in hand, checking my phone like a habit, like a reflex. For one frame, just one, I saw him in the reflection of the glass, standing behind me inside the house, his mouth close to where the microphone would be if microphones had mouths, his eyes fixed not on me, but on the lens, as if the camera were the real resident and I was the guest who kept forgetting the rules. I stopped leaving the house. I ordered groceries. I worked nights and slept days. I taped over the camera lens, then removed the tape when the app sent another message. That won't help. I tried to delete the app. It stayed. I tried to reset the camera. It recorded anyway. The notifications changed tone, becoming less frequent, more specific. Too soon. Too loud. Not yet. The last one came on a night when the fog was so thick the bridge lights looked like a spine dissolving into air. The notification didn't chime. It vibrated, a quiet insistence I felt in my bones. Last notification, it said. The clip opened on the porch, empty and dark. Then the door opened from the inside. I stepped into the frame, older than I felt, thinner than I remembered, pausing like someone about to say something important. The camera recorded because the door moved. It always recorded when the door moved. In the reflection of the glass, I saw the man standing where I had been standing. His posture practiced now, his breathing steady. His finger raised not to knock, not to ring, but to point past the lens, toward the room behind me. Toward the place where a person might think they were alone if they didn't know how carefully the house listened.